Welcome back, team. How's it going? Today we're going to be breaking down in detail the Tank JAYCE build for Season 15. Now, Tank JAYCE was around on the previous season for the last couple of weeks of it, but because Unending Despair was so broken, you rushed that every single game, but it did get a pretty big nerf on this season, so now you have a lot more options. It doesn't mean Tank JAYCE is dead. It's still extremely powerful as long as you know what to build in the right situation. So we're going to be going through when to build each item, how good they are, what the full build should look like, and some examples of the gameplay. So if that sounds good to you, then let's get started. So we're going to be starting off this guide by quickly going through the runes, but we're not going to spend too much time on it, as not much has changed in terms of the runes. However, if you do want to go the lethality page, which is good in some games, you run Conqueror, and Grasp is going to be for the half tank, half damage build, or the full tank build. You can take Grasp and go full damage. That does work with Eclipse into lethality, but if you are running full lethality into matchups such as Cassiopeia, matchups like Rumble, it can be really good to take Conqueror. And I'm going to be explaining it in a lot more detail in the drafting section of this guide, timestamp down below, when to go lethality and when to go grasp, so that can help you out as well. Now, for the tank JAYCE rune page, which is what we're mainly going to be focusing on, you still run grasp, demolish, second wind, overgrowth. You go second wind pretty much every time, but you can go bone plating into matchups like Jax or Riven, the strong all-in lanes, and cookies and jack of all trades. But because you're not going to be rushing the Unending Despair every single game, if there are games where you're going to be going Eclipse into tank, or even Hullbreaker into tank, we'll talk more on that later in the item section, you can take Cosmic Insight instead of Jack of all trades, as it can be really hard to get 10 stacks if that's going to be your build. Alright, now it's time for the good stuff, the item builds, and regardless of your build, even if you're full damage or tank, you're still going to be going Doran's Blade every single game no matter what. And for your first buy, it's going to be tier, and then what you build with the tier really depends on your itemization, what you're going as your first item. So if you've got Jack of all trades on, you should always try to proc that, the 5 stacks of it. So going tier into cloth armor, into refill, if you can afford it, is a really good first recall if you're doing the Iceborne build, or if you still want to build Unending Despair, just make sure you get the 5 stacks. But if you're going a different build where it's really hard to proc it early, or like a Hullbreaker or an Eclipse, something along those lines, then you just really build whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. You can go double Ruby with the Hullbreaker, double Longsword, Pickaxe, doesn't really matter, as long as you're got Jack of all trades on and you're proccing it with intention. The rest of the itemization for your first buy is very, very easy. Now for the boots, it's still going to depend on the game. If you're versing heavy auto attack based champs, like a Graves in the jungle with an AD top like a Riven, Jack, something along those lines, Tabbies will be great. And Merc trades is quite important if you have Jack of all trades, so get that, especially if they have CC. Champs like Gragas top, if they have Leona, Sejuani, champs like that, definitely you want Merc trades. And Swifty boots are just really good at the moment, and good as a filler boots if you don't really need anything else, or if you're verse champions with slowing effects like an Olaf or a Nasus, then Swifty boots are going to be really good for you. And you've probably noticed I didn't have a Phage Rush rune page as an option anymore, and that's just because it's way too weak at the moment. You don't need it anymore. If you run Grasp into matchups like Olaf, they're not really going to be able to run you down as easily as before, as your sustain and beefiness is too high, especially if you have Swifty boots. It's going to be really hard for him to stick onto you, even if you don't have Phage Rush. Now, for your first item, this is where it gets the most important, I would say. And I've got an example, actually, on my next slide of a few matchups where you'd build each item. But Iceborne is going to be especially good into physical damage melee tops. You can still build into range tops, into Quinn, stuff like that. It still work really well, but especially into physical damage melee tops, it's really impactful for kiting them around. The early build path feels really good. Having access is pretty similar, if you think about it, to the old Unending Despair build path. It's pretty much the same, armor, HP, and a bit of haste, but now you have Sheen as an option. And proccing Sheen with Grasp is really good for short trading in lane. I actually wouldn't recommend rushing Sheen as your first item, as it makes you pretty squishy. So going Chain Vest or Ruby and Cloth Armor can be really good, but once you have Sheen on your second recall, you have quite a lot of extra damage and the burst is quite good. And once you had that Iceborne spike, it's really hard for them to all in you. It's very easy for you to kite them around, utilizing your range form E, your hammer Q slow, Iceborne slow, and kind of weaving in and out. It's really hard for melee champs like Riven, champs like Aatrox to stick onto you. You can make it really difficult for them. So I feel like this is a good replacement, and trying it a lot, seeing other high elo Korean top laners use it, I feel like it's a really good replacement for the previous Unending Despair. The build path's very similar. You feel really strong as a one item spike. The problem with Unending Despair Rush now is they did nerf it to the point where you need a lot of HP to get high value from the passive. That doesn't mean you can't build it. It's still a great filler item as your first item, I'd say. And it does still feel really good as a 2-item spike, so Fimbulwinter and Unending Despair. But in my opinion, there's just way too much to do. First Blood's so important, first tower, 2 Void Grub fights. So you want to be as spiked as possible in the early game. So Iceborne is way better as a first item rush compared to Underneath Despair or Fimble Winter Rush. I've seen that as well. Even though that's a better 2-item spike in my opinion, the 1-item spike of Iceborne is a lot better, and one 2-item spike with Iceborne Fimble is still really strong as well. Now for Eclipse, you can go Eclipse into Fimble as well for a half hybrid build. You can imagine how much shielding you're going to have, and that's going to be great into matchups where you want a bit of extra early damage, and armor's not as valuable. So matchups like Teemo, matchups like Aurora, Eclipse into Fimble Winter feels really good. Even matchups like Volibear, I found, if you go Eclipse first, you have a bit of extra damage. Iceborne wouldn't be that bad into volley, of course. You could kite him around, but your damage is a bit low. It's hard to kind of chew through him. But with Eclipse and Fimble, you're still tanky. It's hard for him to threaten you, and you have enough damage as well. Now, for Hullbreaker, you're probably interested to see this as well. It's exceptionally good into champions that struggle to break the empowered creep. So matchups like Gragas, matchups like Kennen. If you have Hullbreaker as your first item, and I have a good example of Zeus building this later on in a matchup against Gragas, you can blow up their tower very early on. You still take Grasp, and you have a lot of early defensive stats. You just stack Ruby Crystals if you want. You can go Jack of all trades and proc it with the movement speed part of Hullbreaker, but you can just go Cosmic, I'd say, because it's really hard to get 10 stacks if you have Hullbreaker as your first item, but this is really good into champions like AP, tanky champs that want to be grouping up. So champs like Rubble, champs like Maokai, they pretty much want to just push lane and group up with their team and force a lot of early fights. But with Hullbreaker, you can keep them stuck under tower. It's really hard for them to kill the minion. You have a pretty good mix of extra damage and also tankiness. You get so much flat HP from the Hullbreaker that it makes it really good. This combined with Demolish, you can really chew through towers as well. So it's really good for that tier 2 collecting playstyle that works really well in mid to low elo brackets. Now for Unending Despair, I touched on it a little bit. It's a really good filler item. So if there's nothing that really stands out to you as a good first item, you can still build it. Or if you just really like being as strong as possible as your 2-item spike, I'd say it's still great. It's not bad at all. I'll just say the other 3 are better. So I'm going to show you the examples here of the matchups where you take each one. And you can see a Phase Rush, Iceborne Gauntlet, sorry, really good into champs like Renekton, Wukong, where they really want to force onto you. If you have Eclipse and a Wukong gets onto you, you're probably dead, or a Renekton gets a good empowered stun onto you, you're dead. But with Iceborne, you can survive all of their burst. You can kite them around. So it feels really good for these types of matchups where their counter to you is the amount of threat that they have on you, even with top jungle. With Iceborne, you can kind of nullify that, and it allows you to contest them in side lane in the mid game as well. Now for Eclipse Rush, you can see it's really hard actually to proc Grasp of the Undying against these champions and get away with it. If you walk up and try to shoot a teammate, he's going to blind you, he's going to shoot you down, you're going to lose that trade. But with Eclipse, you can just kind of burst him and kite it out. So Eclipse, you have enough damage to deal with them. Cassiopeia, if you try to take a short trade against her, good luck, you're going to get run down, and so on and so forth for all these champions. So Eclipse, I found, is better into these types of squishy champions that are really hard for you to take short trades against without them just running you down or destroying you in the trade. Now for Hullbreaker, we talked about it a lot. You can imagine these champions really struggling if you have Hullbreaker and Merc Treads, what they're going to do against you inside. But as you just keep them stuck on the tower, chip away at the tower, poke them down, and make it so they can't really leave their tier 2 without help in the mid game, and maybe even be able to blow up their tower in the laning phase. Now, to round off the build, you can see with your third item, you don't have a lot of choice. That keeps it very easy for you, as if you're doing the Iceborne build, you're going to be going Underneath Despair, so Iceborne, Fimble, Despair every game, as at that point you have so much HP, you're going to get a lot of value from this broken item. And if you're doing the hybrid build, so Eclipse into Fimble, you can go Despair or Shojin, depending if you want a bit more damage. Shojin's a pretty good middle ground, as you get a lot of haste and HP. So you still get a bit of tankiness, but also AD and haste, so a lot of damage as well. And Serpents is just if you need it, regardless of your build. If they have a lot of shielding, you don't have a champ on your team that can do it. If they have Ivern and champs like Janna, Lulu, or maybe in Bessa Top, the Queen of Shielding, you can go Serpent's Fang as your third item. I'd stay away from it with the Iceborne build as a third item, because Unending Despair is so great if you have Iceborne and Winter, but you can still do it if they have a ridiculous amount of shielding. And for the rest of your build, I'd say Juxtra is mainly a final item if you have a lot of resistances already, and you can pick up the spear whenever you want as a 4th or 5th item regardless of your build. As long as you have a Winter and a lot of HP from different items, it can be a great pickup for you. Now for Sundered Sky, that's mainly going to be a 5th item, I would say, as a bit of damage. At this point, if you have a full tank build, so imagining Iceborne, Fimble, and Despair, I'd say the Sundered Sky is going to be a better damage item for you than Spear of Shojin, as you get a lot of extra sustain as well. As effective HP that you're getting from the healing is more useful if you have a lot of resistances from items like Iceborne and Unending Despair. Now, for Randuins, that's going to be great into champs like Tryndamere, Yone. Of course, if they have 2 or even 3 crit champions, you should definitely look to pick this one up. And Visage is a great 4th item if you have the full Drain Tank build. So let's just say Iceborne, Fimbulwinter, and Despair. You have shielding from that item, or even Eclipse into those 2 items. You have a lot of healing and shielding already, so Spirit Visage will be the best MR item for you. So Serpent's Fang, we talked about that, and down below is just Healing Cut. So if they have huge amounts of AD damage and healing, Fawn Mail is great. Or if you need a bit of Armor Pin, maybe they have champs like Maokai and stuff like that, you can go Mortal Reminder if you need Armor Pin and Healing Cut, or you can just go Shrouders if you only need the Armor Pin. Now for our final builds, you can see here, this is an example of what it should look like most of the time, where with the half damage, half tanky build with Eclipse, you kind of round it off to be full damage with just a Fimbulwinter and Shojin as your beef. That doesn't mean you have to do that every time. If after your Shojin, or maybe even before, you want to opt into more tank, depending on the threat that they have. So the drafting section is definitely going to help you a lot for itemization as well, knowing what to build into what comps you're versing. You can go either way with the middle build, with the half damage, half tank build with Eclipse as your first item. But with Iceborne, you should pretty much always go full tank with tanky damage items like Sundered Sky, or maybe even Spiro Shojin if you wanted to. If you're wondering about Black Cleaver, I don't recommend it. I'd say if you need Armor Pin, just grab Shroud's Grudge as Black Cleaver, even though it does give you a bit of HP and AD. It's just a pretty bad item. It's not going to be horrible on JAYCE, of course, right? HP, AD, Armor Pin, it's not going to be bad. I'll just say any other item that you can build in that kind of category is going to be better for you. Now, for Hullbreaker, I'd say Merc Trades is really important because you're probably going to be building this into AP champs like Maokai or Kennen or Rumble, so Merc Trades will be a great pickup. You can go Swifties if it's just Rumble and no other CC, for example, but Hullbreaker Merc Trades is going to be a great spike for you, and then Fimbulwinter, Despair, and Visage. So very similar to the tank build, just with Hullbreaker first, making it really difficult for the enemy top laner to deal with you and give you a lot of threat on towers as well, and then just rounding off your build with Sundered Sky, I found gives you a good mix of damage and tankiness. So now we're going to be moving on to some examples of how to best utilize the tank JAYCE build in the laning phase. And starting with this example of Zeus playing up against a Gragas, and he rushed Hullbreaker as his first item, and definitely gained himself a massive lead and exploded the lane in this game. This matchup was really tricky in the past, I'd say it's Gragas favored, but with this build and setup, granted you play it well, you can look to get a lead. So you can see, looking to proc grass whenever he can, and bait out the Gragas Q. The most important part about this matchup in the early game is baiting out the Gragas Q and pre-dodging. So you'll see here, this minion, Gragas is going to go up to auto it. So most of the time, if you're playing JAYCE, you want to auto the Gragas or the enemy top every time they go for a minion. So he's going to fake it out, walk towards him, and already click back before autoing to bait the Gragas to use its Q. And now that the Q is on cooldown, he can safely play aggressive. So you can see he's prioritizing his HP bar higher, as Gragas has a lot more sustain than him, even though he does have the grass page. He does have to be careful of that. But now level 2 vs 1, of course he's going to be staunching, making it hard for Gragas to play. So going for a 2-wave crash, which is pretty standard on the new wave control, and going for a ward. He missed the ward though, we don't look at that. We only care about the laning part of it. So here, every time he goes for a minion, he's going to be looking to proc his grasp. You can see here, tries to bait out the Q, but it does get hit by that one. And the Gragas is starting to play a bit better now, looking to hit an Eon to him. But again, every time his grasp is up and Gragas walks up for a minion, he's going to be looking to poke him away from tower there. So a common thing to do in range versus melee matchups is not to let the wave come back into you and try to freeze it like you're playing a Darius or something, is you want to be stacking 2 waves together at the same time, so you don't give an opportunity for the enemy top to have a minion and XP lead. You can see Zeus with level 3 before Gragas, and you do maintain pro and just stack 2 waves at a time and crash them in 2-wave increments instead of just blindly pushing 1 wave at a time, giving them free farm, and also instead of letting the wave come back to you. So we can see here, looking to slow push this wave, poking down with grasp whenever he can, and go for a shock blast if he does walk up. So I'd say the main point of this type of matchup is the 100-0 trading. He has taken some damage. Pretty impossible to versus a Gragas and not get poked down a little, but he is taking really good trades consistently and poking Gragas every time he walks up, and a lot of baiting Qs. So you're not going to dodge every single Q, but even if you dodge half of them, or maybe a bit more like he has here, you can see he's in such a good position. And now that he does have this HP advantage, it's really hard for Gragas to farm under tower. You can see 30 to 13 at this point. So he's also hitting a good mix between getting good CS and punishing the opponent without missing a lot himself. So there, could have got the kill if he had the shock blast there. Good idea. And now he knows Gragas has to base. He's too low HP to stay with my jungle top. So he's looking to push the wave in. So absorbing some mana from the hammer form auto attacks on the wave. And then looking just to push base and TP. So fast forward, TP takes a long time now. We don't want to waste time watching it. And if you're curious about his first buy, he went tier into Cull. He does go Hullbreaker after this. But he just went this to have the strongest buy he could on this one recall. So back to lane now. You can see he goes for the shock blast. Unable to hit it here. and then looking to stack up Grasp again. So every time Gragas walks up, he's going to go for him, utilizing the minion wave so he can't get hit by Gragas E, and still trying to bait out the Q, you can see here, and looking to punish when the Q is on cooldown. So it looks to get the AoE slow from the wave onto Gragas. Unsuccessful there, but pretty good idea. And you can see his movement here is very erratic, very hard for Gragas to E. But this Gragas player, of course, high elo Korean player, not going to throw out the E and miss it. But if you do that type of erratic movement, bait out left and juke to the right, you might be able to dodge E versus different Gragas players. So we can see the trade's not going as well for him here, but still, as long as you can chase him down after the E is on cooldown, like this, he's able to get a successful trade. So it goes to Ward now, spots the jungler, and level 4 Kha'Zix's not really the most threat, so he is able to beat him down. Pretty sure he won this one. You can see here, so tanky from the extra stats and sustain from the grass page, able to pick up that 1 for 0. So basically now it's time to build bases after this wave, pretty sure. Let's speed it up a little bit. Goes and gets a ward on grubs, plays for fruit, so good on him. And now looking to keep the Gragas stuck under tower. Actually, he chose to stay, play for fruit. Good call by him. And you can see this is a really good ward to put down, by the way, in your games. The ward that shows the entrances to river and also grubs at the same time. And he's able to help his Karthus get those by maintaining prio and getting good vision down. So now looking to poke down this Gragas, again looking to keep him stuck under tower. If your opponent's in a worse position than you in lane in terms of sustain, like he is now, you don't want to be really giving him an opportunity to recall for free. But you can see he's not just blindly pushing the wave, he's trying to slow build a big wave while keeping Gragas stuck under tower. So there Gragas goes for the ulti under tower, good try by him, but now he's going to be pretty screwed here. Looking to get his Demolish proc before he goes for the dive. He's trying to wait for Karthus to come in just to guarantee it. No point diving now, but because Gragas sees in, he just took the guaranteed kill. But I like the patience there waiting for his jungler to get involved if Gragas held his abilities. So proxying the wave for a higher tempo recall, and coming back after this, no, very, very greedy at 1 extra plate. As long as you don't miss your recall timing, you can be as greedy as you want with plates. Tempo doesn't matter as much in the early game. So as long as you don't miss your recall, it's fine. But if you don't know the exact timing when your opponent will get back to lane, especially with home guards, it's always better to be safe than sorry. Because if you get 1 plate but your recall stopped, your lane can turn on its head. So we can see it building towards the Hullbreaker, Tunneler, and Pickaxe. He does not have Jack of all trades, which is why he didn't go into the movement speed part of it. Because he doesn't need, he's got Cosmic Insight instead, so no need to try to proc that intentionally. So looking to push the wave in now, looking just to play for Demolish procs. He does have to be a bit careful here, doesn't have the Hullbreaker yet. And Gragas can look to ult him under tower, which is why he's kind of keeping his distance based on where Gragas is, buffering the E through Gragas E, which was good by him here. And I'm going to speed up a little bit. I want to showcase the power of Hullbreaker, how different he can play when he has that item. So he normally just, at this point, he just plays until he has it, and then gets a recall off and TP's back. So I'll speed up a little bit, ulted into tower here. You can see, able to burn the flash, almost gets the kill there, just trading flashes with Gragas, but now in a good position. So he goes for the optimistic shock blast and then 1 plate and base, greedy boy. But now you can see Hullbreaker, TP's back, and he does have a nice CS lead against the Gragas. He has played the lane extremely well. But even if, let's imagine Gragas had a bit more CS and he's in this position, as long as you can get your Hullbreaker early on before plates fall. So I'd say between 10 and 12 minutes is a pretty good goal to get it. You'll notice he didn't delay his Hullbreaker for tier 2 boots. He even delayed it for Cull and he still got it. So if you don't get the Cull early, you can get it a bit faster. But once you have this item, as long as you can get it before plates have fallen, you can look to get a massive lead in your lane against these champions that don't really deal with it well. Champs like Rumble, champs like Gragas works really well into. So now he's going to be looking to play for that, pushes in the wave, and here we go. He does have to be mindful. He doesn't want to get Gragas ulted into tower. So he is spacing him a little bit here. Doesn't want to get punished by that. But once the cannon wave is here, he's going to be looking to play much more aggressive. So you'll see on this timer, he's playing very careful. Doesn't want to get Gragas ulted. Especially if you get hit by Gragas Q. It's pretty impossible to dodge the ulti. So he's looking to play a bit more careful here. Then when the next wave comes in, you'll see he didn't go for the tower or anything like that there. But now that it's a cannon wave, he's looking to go. So you'll see he also stopped the Gragas' base there. He doesn't want Gragas to be full HP. Because if he's low, it's easier for the JAYCE here to staunch and play for the tower plates here. So walks up. The Gragas ults him, but doesn't matter. The tower's invincible now. You can see it's so much harder for an AP tanky champ like Gragas to deal with the cannon wave compared to an AD champion like a JAYCE that could just bash it down relatively quickly. So tower's down to 200 HP, and he's able to get 5 plates in tower pretty much 1v1 around 12 minutes into the game. So you can see the power of this build, where if you've been a JAYCE player in the past and you've taken Phage Rush or even Conqueror with the lethality build into Gragas, even back when the Eclipse was OP and gave Omnivamp. By the time you got that, you're probably already behind at that point, really hard to sustain. But because he's got the Grass Page with second wind overgrowth, all that extra sustain, and the extra beefiness from early itemization to Hullbreaker, not only can he get by the lane with a relatively good lead, he can blow up the tower very early as well. Moving on to our next example, this game I'm playing up against an Aatrox. And you can see by their team comp, Aatrox, Viego, Galio, so much threat on their team, even a Bard. So I went Iceborne in this game, and I wanted to showcase the power of it. So I'm not going to go through the entire laning phase, just the key moments, but I did want to break down how I got my lead. So level 1, you can see poking him every time he walks up. And normally I'd want to be playing on the top side by the bushes and resetting minion aggro, but I wanted to get my level 1 ward down, because I'm planning to play extremely aggressive, and I didn't want to get level 3 ganked by Viego. So looking to pick up these minions and poke him every time he walks up. You can see I'm blocking him between the wave and his character. So if he ever does walk up, I can shoot him before he even reaches the minion. So proccing grass, back in the bush, dropping the aggro. But now I'm going to get level 2, so it's time to go. I'm waiting for his Q2 before I hammer Q in, and then clicking backwards to avoid the Q3 entering. And now I'm trading auto. So normally on JAYCE, you don't like to make it this volatile and get low yourself. But if you are up against a weak early game champ, like a Aatrox or a Yorick, champs like a Lowy, where later on gets really annoying, but early game is good for you, you can make it very volatile. Normally I'd be poking him under tower here, but Galio was level 2 ganking top, so unfortunately we did have to respect. I ran all the way back to this bush because it's Korea. Normally they don't care if you're respecting, they just come. But lucky for me, Galio went back to mid. So here we can see, looking to bait out the Aatrox Qs and click backwards before he even uses them. And now that they're on cooldown, then I can play a bit more aggressive. So normally, I'd want to be getting level 3 before him and trimming the wave. But again, the Galio gank, that changed our game plan. But I'm still poking him every single time he walks up for CS. So now he walks up for that minion, auto E, able to pick up first blood. So I'd say even though I didn't get to really showcase the power of JAYCE due to the Galio gank, you can see how strong you can be just straight away from level 1 if you're willing to make it volatile up against champions that have a pretty hard time reaching you, especially if they're champs that get a lot stronger later on. So if you don't get a lead versus a level 5 Aatrox or a level 6 Yorick or a Lowy, it gets very, very tough for you. But if you can get that lead early game by really showcasing your power and abusing your level timers, you can definitely make the later points of that matchup easy as well. Now I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to showcase the power of Sheen. So you can see around 7 minutes into the game, my short trading power is going to be a lot higher, where if I was up against a champion like Aurelia, where short trades don't matter as much, I'd probably look to go chain verse first, as I need to have more survivability into her. But we'll see very shortly how much extra damage you do with the Sheen. So stepping back the Q2, now looking to punish him, dodging the W here, and a couple Sheen procs there. The damage is definitely noticeable. So here we walk up, trying to bait out, dodge his Q2 by jumping in, hammer him away, and then as he's walking back to tower, switch into range form. So you can see I'm still weaving in and out, but the damage is significantly higher, and you also get a bit of early haste as well from that early Sheen. So now he's in a position where I can dive him, baiting out his abilities, waiting for him to W, and then I go for the dive. So a bit of a bad Q by me, but still able to pick up the kill. And you can see here, he was full HP. It's even a level above me at the start, but the extra damage you get from Sheen in these matchups, you want to be poking them down and bullying them a bit early, is definitely noticeable. But again, if you are against champions with a lot of threat, you can go early chain vest instead. Now I wanted to finish up the laning section with an example of the Iceborne power spike into a champion with good all-in threat. So this game here, I'm up against a Yasuo, and he is a bit behind, don't get me wrong. He's level 8 versus my 9, but I'm not the fittest champion in the game at the moment. You can see I'm 1 and 2 from the top right, died to a few ganks, and I have got some tower plates, which is a strength of this build. But you can imagine, even if this guy was level 9, it's not going to do anything for him. I just completely destroy him. So this is definitely, I'd say, the strongest armor item rush for JAYCE at the moment, after the spear got nerfed to be split resistances and the passive not being as good anymore as the one item. So definitely a really powerful one item spike. I'd say a big part about it as well, that a lot of League players and even other content creators underrate, is the build path for this item. Yeah, once you have Unending Despair complete, it still feels pretty good, but building Aegis of the Legion early game and Giants belt feels pretty horrible. But the Iceborne having access to Chain vs Ruby and even Sheen feels good in a lot of matchups. Not only is it a more powerful one item spike, but the build path is better as well. Moving on to team fighting. Now, this is still the most simple part of the new JAYCE build, as you pretty much just go in and weave in and out, play around your cooldowns, but I still want to showcase some examples of it just so you get a good feel for how it looks. So we can see I go for a TP flank, which is also something you can do on the tank JAYCE build, where you can't really TP flank on damage JAYCE, and I can just tank their damage, tank their CC, look to just keep sending in hammer Qs. You can see I'm not just like running in like an Olaf, I'm kiting in and out, playing off my cooldowns here, but I'm able to tank a lot of their damage, a lot of their CC, and even start the fight with a TP flank. Pretty sure I do die in the end here, but we still got a lot of value down. So you can kind of see I'm 1 item spike at the moment, 1.5. I just finished my Fimbul now, but the extra tankiness and damage cannot really slept on, even in these fights. So I'll skip here to the last fight of the game. You'll see it's very similar, where now I've got 3 items. I even messed up my build a little bit here, I'm pretty sure. I don't have my Underneath Despair. I was building like it was the last season one with Spirit Visage 3rd, but it didn't really matter here, so you can see. I'm looking to control Baron. I'm pinging. I really want to play for this, but I don't really have anyone on my team that's getting the fight started, so I did it myself here. So Hammerform Q in, tank the Brawl multi, the Lee Sin combo. Still coming in. Lee Sin comes in again with another Q. Pretty sure he even kicked me in the head. Maokai ult. Doesn't matter. I'm extremely fan of this game, don't get me wrong. I just wanted to showcase a couple of examples of this build, and just so you have a better idea that when you play it, you have to be playing a lot more aggressive and not be afraid to get fights started yourself. Alright, so we're going to be wrapping up this guide with the drafting, but more specifically not when to pick JAYCE, but when to build tank or damage, depending on the champions in the game. Now, the most important part is definitely the enemy team, what they're showing on their team, but you could look to make the argument your team's damage threshold matters as well. So if you have a really low damage team comp, like a Ivern jungle, and mid is just like a Zed or something like that doesn't really do much damage, or a Silas, you could look to build more damage in that game, maybe the half-half build with Eclipse into Fimbul. That could be a good indicator for you. But and if you have a full damage comp, so let's say you have Graves jungle, and you have a mid like Xerath that's just full damage, you could look to build more tanky. But I'd say more often than not, the enemy team comp is the most important by far. So if you verse champions that have a lot of threat onto you, so let's just build a mega threat comp like a Jax, jungle could be a Vi, Jarvan, Nocturne, doesn't really matter. Any champion that normally threatens JAYCE, where in the past, if you saw, let's get rid of Jax. Actually, it's a pretty good matchup. Let's make it a bit harder. Put a skill matchup in there. If you saw they had a lot of threat on their team comp, something like this, you probably wouldn't look to go... Simmer's not played that much. You probably wouldn't look to go JAYCE in this type of game. It's really hard for him to play out. But the tank version of JAYCE, especially with the Iceborne type of build, would do really well in this type of comp. So this is definitely going to be a huge green flag for you when to build full tank, especially Iceborne Golem. But if they have a strong backline comp, not really a much threat onto you. So if they have champions like Zyra jungle, that's pretty good at the moment, or any, let's just give them the Xerath, comps like that, then the full damage build is going to be a lot better for you, regardless of if they do have threat on their team still. So you can imagine champs like Aatrox, champs like Alistair, they can threat in JAYCE, but their backline is not really going to be the same effect. Let's give them a Jinx as well. And in terms of tanking up damage and getting stuck in there, you don't really want to dive into champs like Zyra and Xerath. It's pretty hard for you, unless you can get onto them very easily, which is going to be hard for you. So a comp like this, you would want to be doing more of that lethality build. So if they have a lot of threat, champs like Nocturne, Jarvan, Vi from jungle, assassin mid like Zed or Talon, stuff like that, the full tank build is going to give you a lot more value. Now, your matchup does matter too. So if they had a comp like the, let's just give them the Zyra, where I want you to build lethality, but you're up against a champ like Gragas, you'd still go Hullbreaker in this game, as it's so good for this matchup. And going to Eclipse, even though at Eclipse it does feel pretty good, getting to Eclipse unscathed with pickaxes and swords is quite difficult in this matchup, but with Hullbreaker, all the extra sustain from the grass page and the extra ruby crystals you're building can give you a lot of value, and especially once you have the Hullbreaker, really hard for him to match you in side lane. So the matchup is a big factor for it. So if you verse a matchup like a Cassiopeia, even if they have threat on their comp somewhere, you probably don't want to go full tank. Let's give them a Nocturne, something like that. This is a champion that would normally make you want to build tank, but if you do the grass build and build tank into Cassiopeia, a good Conqueror Cass player, you're going to get completely shit on. So in this type of game, you'd still want to go more lethality, or even Eclipse into Fimbulwinter would do a lot better, as you might need the extra tankiness up against the Nocturne. But the main point is, if they have a lot of threat on the enemy team comp, you do want to be building more tanky, and if they have more of a strong backline, and that not that much diving through it onto, then that lethality build can give you a lot of value, especially if your matchup dictates for it. Alright team, that's it for now. As usual, if you have any questions at all about the JAYCE build or any topic you'd like to see me cover next, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. I'll see what I can do, and best of luck in your games. I'll see you all next time.